A lot of you know, some of you may not know that I misspent my 20s and 30s in the fire rescue service as a paramedic and paramedic supervisor, fire service instructor, so I have a lot of bad habits as an instructor that I'll be inflicting on you this evening. I apologize in advance. Everybody knows that we had the incident out at our field a while back that was very severe. We were very lucky that we didn't have a member killed that day, and as a result, we talked to the fire department and made some changes in the way we're set up in their system to make sure that we get an appropriate response to the field. In the meantime, talking about the accident out in Bithlo, there's been a couple of on Hill of Freak incidents, people hitting themselves with helicopters. So I want to talk a little bit about bleeding management and what to do for that 5 to 8 minutes that you're waiting for help to arrive, because until they get here, you are the help. We'll get the boring stuff out of the way real quick. Just kind of describe how your cardiovascular system works. We'll kind of talk about it in a mechanical way. I'll try not to bore you too much with, a lot of terminology and whatnot. But basically, your circulatory system is your heart, the blood itself, and the vessels that contain it. And your heart, kind of like a mechanical pump, you have a high pressure side and a low pressure side. And from the high pressure side to all the tissues in your body, you have arteries, which tend to be a little smaller in diameter, have nice thick walls to them. The walls are actually muscular. And then when the blood gets to the body and does all the gas exchange and stuff that you were bored to death with in high school, it comes back to the heart, to the other side, to the low pressure side, through the veins. And they're wider in diameter, they're not muscular, they contain less pressure because they're wider in diameter, they have more volume, therefore less pressure. The reason this is important for what we're talking about is if I cut a vein, I get a welling of blood that comes out. It's a mess, you get blood all over the place. But unless you cut a great big vein, it takes a while for venous bleeding to be a big problem. Arterial bleeding, on the other hand, you cut the high pressure side, it's like cutting a high pressure hose in your air conditioner or something like that. Your heart's pumping the fluid right out and it's squirting. If you've ever seen it or ever do see it, you will have no trouble identifying it because blood is going to fly everywhere. Those people are in a life-threatening emergency, and what you do in the next couple of minutes may very well make a difference between them living and dying while you're waiting for the ambulance to show up. So the first thing you want to do, access 911. Get help coming first, and then we're going to start doing things. If there's more than one person available at the field, obviously you want to get pressure on that, start your treatment, and have the other person call 911. But if you're the whole show, early access to 911 is important. Dial 911, put your phone on speaker, set it next to the person, and do what you need to do, but get that 911 call in and get help coming. There's a cue sheet. It's at the field. I also gave you a copy of it. The address for the field is posted on the placards at the field and on there. Some things you want to make sure you tell the dispatcher. If you're alone, or if you're the only person there taking care of the person and the gate is locked, please make sure the dispatcher knows that, because they're going to need to send a fire truck to cut the lock. And they're more than happy to do it. I can tell you right now, firefighters love to break stuff. So they're more than happy to come out there and cut it. But they need to know that they need forcible entering. Just the real basics, is the person awake? That's kind of the gold standard for letting you know how the person is doing. If they're awake and oriented, things are going fairly well in the body right now. If you can't get them to respond to you, things aren't going so well. Describe the injury. Huge dragonfly. Yeah. Cool. Describe the injury, the location, and the severity. Try and give the dispatcher an idea. As we know with the incident in our field, the dispatcher kind of got the idea. It was a little bit of helicopter, couldn't do much damage. As a result, the response that we got wasn't what was needed for the incident. So emphasize to him, the guy's a 6-inch cut on his arm, he's bleeding profusely. That kind of gives them an indication that they need to send additional units and they need to send them right away. If there is bleeding that's spurting, let them know that, because then that's going to trigger a different set of response. You're going to get more units, you're going to get advanced life support that's capable of dealing with that a little better. And finally, stay with the dispatcher until they tell you to get off the line. Obviously let them know if you're the person doing the first aid, let them know, hey, I'm busy trying to control bleeding. They may give you some pre-hospital instructions, they may not. It depends on where you are, what level of certification the dispatcher has. But that pretty much covers the 911 call. So what are you gonna do in the meantime? There are 4 basic steps that you're gonna use for controlling bleeding. Direct pressure, elevation, an arterial pressure point, and if things really aren't going well and it's not your day, a tourniquet. Tourniquets have actually come back in favor, and they found that they actually make a tremendous difference in survival for really severe hemorrhage. And we're going to talk about tourniquet application. I have a trainer here, I'll show you all of that. Anybody want to be a volunteer victim for a moment before I volunteer somebody? Oh, he's Kerry because he's here. Come on over. All right. So Kerry was out retrieving his helicopter and hooked himself on some barbed wire. He's bleeding a little bit, but it's not spraying out of the wound. It's just bleeding a little bit. Cute little, we'll pull some hair off. So the first thing you want to do is put a pair of gloves on. Gloves. So you don't have to trade any ickies with anybody. There are plenty of gloves in our first aid kit at the field. Take a sterile dressing, one of the ones that's in a little baggie. Open the little baggie. Stick the white stuff on the red stuff and push. May not be terribly comfortable, but we get the bleeding stopped. Now, if this piece of gauze gets all saturated with blood, it's all red now and nasty, don't pull it off. As your blood is exposed to air, it's trying to clot. You got little platelets and fibrinogen and all this magical chemistry going on. And it's going to be stuck to this piece of gauze. So if I pull it off, I pull the clot off and I continue the bleeding. So just pile more gauze on, the more the merrier, and continue direct pressure. If your direct pressure isn't getting it, and you don't have any reason that his arm is broken, hold it up above his heart. Since the heart has to push the blood up, less pressure to the wound, less leaking. If that's still not working, thank you, sir. I'm going to talk about the rest. You can rip that off if you want. If that's still not getting it done, we'll talk about pressure points. I'm only going to teach you 2. There are dozens and dozens and dozens. These 2 will get the job done for you. The first one is called your brachial pressure point. If you take your arm, stick your fingertips right up under your bicep and push up, and then push down against the bone, you'll feel a little pulse going. That's your brachial artery. You're just going to cone in off on that sucker and push it into the bone. It's not comfortable for you after a couple minutes. It's not comfortable for them at all, but it will stop the bleeding because it stops you're mechanically interrupting the flow of blood to the wound. Don't sit there and practice on it too long because your hand will go numb. The other pressure point I'm going to teach you is the femoral pressure point. I'm not going to demonstrate, well, you can play with this on your own at home. The femoral pressure point is located in the crack between your leg and your crotch. It's a great big artery, and what you want to do is just take the heel of your hand, stick it in there, and push down as hard as you can. Again, not comfortable for the patient, not comfortable for you for a while, but if you've got an arterial bleed in the leg being fed by that femoral artery, you don't have a whole lot of time to play. It's a big pipe, it's like a garden hose, and people can pump out all their blood in a couple of minutes through a femoral artery, if not faster. So, let's say we've tried all of that, and we're just not getting it. Blood is still spurting out of that wound, and things just aren't going well. Step number 4, let's go with a tourniquet. There are 2 of these in the first aid kit. This one is a trainer, which is why it's a pretty blue color. The other ones are black. This was actually developed by the military. They've been using them for about 13 years over in the sandbox, and they found that they make a tremendous difference. They're rapid application, and they really make a difference in achieving bleeding control with big nasty wounds. Let me borrow Kerry again for a minute. When you pull this thing out of its out of the box, they're folded up like this. All you have to do is unfold it, stick it over the arm. We'll have a bigger wound here we're going to pretend we're dealing with. Get this red tab, pull the red tab up, stick 2 fingers under it, snug it down tight, wrap the Velcro just up to where the little windlass is. If you're the kind of person that likes to play with things and you pull one out of the box and play with it, please don't crank the windlass down. For the sake of training, we're just going to give it a half a turn and let it stick in the clip there. Then you take this guy, wrap it all the way around, and it'll Velcro to itself up to the point where it sticks. You'll get a tail after a bit, nobody cares. And then finally, this last little strap has a little time label on it, goes over. If you have a pen, write the time on there. Lets the surgeon know how long this has been up. It's important to them as far as saving the tissue down below where the injury is. Thank you, sir. You are once again a great example patient. In the packet that I gave you, there is a section. The second page is actually a handout from FEMA. They have an online course you can take. There's a link in the back. You can actually take a first aid course online. It's an interactive video thing. They go through a little more than what I'm going through tonight. But it's actually quite a good course, and I would recommend it. On the next page, there's a little drawing stolen from a Fire One textbook that shows you the 2 pressure points. And there are a couple of URLs on there. One of them is to the FEMA course. The other one is to the CAT tourniquet site. And they have application videos you can look over if you want a little more information on how to deploy those. I want to talk about a couple other special things real quick. And then we'll be done for what we're going to do tonight. The first one is going to be wounds to the neck. And it kind of goes without saying, but I've actually seen people do this because they've been panicked. If you have a wound on the neck that you're applying pressure to, do not apply pressure to both sides of the neck. You have great vessels that run down the sides of the neck, and if you compress them both, you'll eventually starve the brain out, and the person will pass out, and or you can do some pretty significant damage if you're conating off on some of the structures of the neck. And yes, I have rolled up on a scene and found somebody who wrapped a ace bandage around a guy's neck because he had his cut. Cut wasn't that big a problem. The lack of oxygen for a couple minutes, that turned out to be a problem. Head wounds. Be really careful applying pressure in head wounds. Head wounds bleed like crap. You have a tremendous amount of blood flow to the scalp. When you cut the scalp, you bleed a lot. Direct pressure on the head wound, you want to make sure, you want to think about the mechanism of injury. If somebody gets hit with a Heli blade in the side of the head, be really careful how much pressure you're putting on there, because if you've got broken bone underlying that wound and you stick your hand in there, you shove bone into the brain, and as it turns out, that's just not a good thing. It didn't start out there, we don't need to add it to it. Other than that, for head wounds, just direct pressure normally takes care of it. Just kind of know what's going on under where you're putting pressure before you start putting a lot of pressure. Impaled objects. Say somebody has a crash and throws a blade and it's stuck in their chest. This is what you absolutely do not want to do. Don't hold an impaled object out. It may very well be that whatever's sticking in their chest is holding pressure against a blood vessel in the chest or against another structure, and when you pull it out of there, whammo, now you got bleeding started, and it's in the chest, so you can't put pressure on it and control it. Not a great thing. Same thing with the abdomen anywhere. If something's sticking in a wound, put dressings on either side of it and push on either side of it and just leave it there. Let the fire department guys figure out what they want to do with it. What they're probably going to do is just build a big dressing around it, cut it off if it's too long, and take them to the surgeon and let the surgeon deal with it. Surgeons get really cranky when you do their job. And last but not least, while we're talking about things inside, if you get a significant enough injury across the abdomen, especially for those of us who aren't extra armored in this vicinity, it's entirely possible to have squiggly looking things popping out of there that really aren't appealing. They're not appealing, but don't put them back in. Cover it with a big sterile dressing and leave it alone. That's another thing, surgeons get really cranky when you start doing that kind of crap. On a slightly unrelated note, when we're talking about minor injuries, we have a problem in our hobby where everybody wants to put super glue on. Please do not ever put super glue on a wound. The stuff they use in the hospital is not the stuff in the bottle in your toolkit. It's a different chemical, it has different properties for a reason, and you have to know enough about wound closure to evaluate that wound before you just go closing it, or you can create a lot of problems. So please, no super glue. And that pretty much covers what I wanted to talk about tonight as far as bleeding control. Does anybody have any questions, comments?
Can you just discuss, so in the 15 years I've been in the hobby, I've heard of some horror stories with helis, and even know some people who killed themselves flying.
Yes.
Can you discuss, maybe just recap, maybe like just some of the more serious injuries and what someone could have done if they had witnessed a big accident like that, or even perhaps the one that happened in our field? We don't need names or anything, but just what could fellow flyers have done if they saw it, or what could the pilot himself have done differently?
Okay. I'll start with one that was on HeliFreak that we kind of kicked around a lot. I've talked to the guy privately, and also the stuff that he posted. Is an individual was flying a helicopter, 570-600 class. Something happened, he hit himself in the arm from about the shoulder down past the elbow all the way down to the bone. He was flying by himself, and he was very, very lucky that he was able to crawl back to his car to get something to put on his injury and call 911. He said openly in his post that he barely made it back to the car because he was becoming so dizzy and his vision was closing down because of his blood loss. Which emphasizes something we've talked about before. Don't fly big helis by yourself, because if something goes bad, especially at our field where you're way back off the road, they're not going to find you until somebody's out retrieving your body. In his case, aside from not flying by yourself, sometimes some people like to fly by themselves and you can't talk them out of it. Have first aid materials ready, have your phone physically on your person so you can call for help. Know the address where you are. If you like to fly at a schoolyard or something like that, know where you are so help can come find you. The GPS in the phone doesn't always get the job done with 911. It's a lot better now than it used to be, but it doesn't always get the job done. As far as self-rescue, he was kind of limited in what he could do because of the nature of the injury and what he had on him. He was very fortunate that he was able to get back to his vehicle and get help. He very nearly passed out before he got back to his vehicle, and it would have had a very different and much worse outcome. The incident in our field, it was interesting. It has some instructional things to it that we've talked about. Basically, for those that don't know, the pilot was flying a 570 size helicopter. It struck him in the face and neck, inflicting a severe neck wound, cutting off a piece of his nose, doing some other damage. Fortunately, there were other people with him at the time who were able to activate 911 and begin first aid while they were waiting for the troops to arrive. Unfortunately, there was a miscommunication between the person who called 911 and the dispatcher and the units in the field. And what ended up happening is the dispatcher believed from the description of the incident, i.e. a model helicopter hit somebody, the dispatcher's point of view was, oh, I've seen those at the mall, they're this big, what could they do? So in almost every ambulance system in the world, there are two tiers of ambulances. There's a basic and an advanced life support unit. Basic life support units handle less severe cases. Advanced life support units handle things like uncontrolled bleeding, heart attacks, cardiac arrest, that sort of thing. They have a higher level of certification and more toys to play with when they get to the scene. So what happened with our call at the field was dispatcher thinks it's a little tiny helicopter. They sent a basic unit, routine, no lights and siren, just basic unit going out to apply a Band-Aid and take them to the hospital for stitches. Basic unit gets on the scene and goes, whoa, we are kind of out of our depth here. Gets on the radio, calls for the planet. So now you've got fire engine coming for manpower, you've got an advanced life support unit coming. They were looking at a helicopter and decided that they would probably be able to do ground transport faster than their second new helicopter because the closest helicopter was out. So they came out, packaged him, took him to the hospital. He ended up being in ICU for a while because of the nature of his injury. It hit him so hard that it did internal damage to his neck that took a while to resolve. Everything except for the 911 response was just about perfect, and he's really lucky because Dad, I talked to the paramedic who took care of him. I talked to the firefighter or the fire officer that was in command that day, and he came just about as close as you could come to killing himself with that helicopter without doing it as you can. It wouldn't have taken more than another couple of millimeters of depth where the blade hit him in the neck, or a few degrees around the neck one way or another, and it would have been a non-survivable injury. So it's a good example, though, of having things together. There was somebody there that knew the address of the field and could call 911 immediately. They sent somebody down to the gate to direct the units in. They had first aid applied immediately to the situation, and he was really lucky. Any other questions? Anything else you want to chat about? Don't get me started on war stories. We'll be here all night. Alrighty, well, I hope that was useful for you. If you think of any questions later, let me know. I'm going to post links to all of this stuff on Facebook. And if you get a chance, do check out the videos and the links on there. They're definitely worthwhile.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.